How to use subject to real estate investing. 6 ways. First, what is subject to? In real estate, it's when a motivated seller is willing to sell their property and leave their existing mortgage in place to the new buyer. In other words, the new buyer steps into the seller's shoes and starts making the monthly payments while the seller deeds the property over to the buyer, and the underlying mortgage never gets cashed out down the road. Now let's dive in. 6 ways to use a subject to real estate investing. The number 1 way is something that most people don't talk about. Don't want to talk about that first. When I look at a deal, sometimes the deal might have a cloud on the title, which means that there might be an additional lien, like a mechanical lien, like there was a construction work and the seller never paid it off, or it was a fake mechanical lien, whatever, it doesn't matter, but there's a lien on the title is showing, okay? So if the seller sells traditionally, they have to pay that off, right? But if I buy subject to, I'm willing to buy it subject to the lien. I'm willing to buy it subject to the cloud, okay? Which allows me to pay it off down the road versus right now, okay? A good example of that is, like I talked about, a mechanical lien. There's other types of liens out there that I wouldn't want to do that. For example, like an IRS lien or a bank lien. But other types of liens are second, third, fourth, etc. I may consider those types of liens as a way to buy a subject to, where I would not buy it traditionally, okay? Now let's dive in. Number 2 way to use a subject to in real estate is when the property has negative equity. What does that mean? Let's say the value of the property is only $100,000, but the seller owes 110, 120, 130, because for whatever reason, okay? So not only does the seller has to pay the negative part, which is in this case, if they owe 130, they would have to pay the $30,000 because it's negative, plus they would have to pay all the closing costs and etc. So the seller would have to come up significantly out of the property. So in situations like that, the seller may just walk out and deed the property back to the bank, or let it go to foreclosure. They would just walk away and hurt their credit. In this situation, a subject to may work for the seller because it's not their best option, but it's their best worst option, because it still has ability to save their credit. As I make the monthly payments, it helps their credit. When I cash out the property, it's going to help their credit because the property is still under the seller's name, even though that I own the deed, because at closing they deed me the property, and so on. So let's move on to number 3. The third way that to use a subject to in real estate investing for me would be when a property or a home has marginal equity. So what that means is that the house is worth 100, okay, and the homeowner may owe $95,000 on it, okay? And in their mind, hey, I have $5,000 in equity, but that's marginal equity, because whenever you do all the closing costs, for example, 3% for sellers, 3% for buyer agents, that's 6%, 3% for closing costs, which is all the fees that goes with it, from title policy to filing fees, notaries, etc. And then you have to also add in there, 1 to 3% of the sales price in negotiation, and you have to also add in their post-inspection repairs. So when you consider all that, at the minimum, the seller has to pay 10% in closing costs. So when someone has marginal equity, they're really going to have to come up a lot out of their pocket. Therefore, this would be a great strategy for a subject to real estate investing on marginal equity properties. Now, the fourth way where it's a great strategy to buy houses with subject to is when they have zero equity. So for example, the house is worth 100 and they owe 100. Now in the seller's mind, they think they don't owe anything, but again, once they go to the closing cost, 3% realtor, buyer, 3% seller, 3% closing policy, title, all that stuff there, post negotiation inspection fees, and so on, easily 10%. So the seller's going to be actually 10% at the minimum underwater, assuming that the house passes his inspection. So even on a house that has not positive equity, not negative equity, right in the center, the seller has to come up money out of pocket, which is a great strategy for subject to, because we could buy the property and allow the seller to not come up that money out of pocket. Okay. Now, another great way to use subject to for real estate is when the house has major repair problems. For example, the house will not pass an inspection. They've tried to go sell it traditionally on the MLS. Maybe it needs X, or it needs foundation work. Maybe it needs this. Okay, and buying it subject to will work greatly, because they're not going to be able to go traditionally unless they're able to sink money into it. So, and maybe they don't have the money. Maybe the house has negative equity, marginal equity, zero equity in one of those categories, or maybe it has a lot of equity, but they don't want to sink any more money into it because they have other obligations. Whatever the story may be, this will be a great strategy to use subject to, because the house won't pass inspection and the house needs major repairs. This is also great for fix and flippers and people that want to do long-term buy and hold, that know how to do fix and flipping. Personally, I wouldn't want to do that type of transaction, but some other people like it. Now, another perfect strategy to use for way to use subject to is when the property has high equity. Okay, if the property has a high equity, I mean, it's just no brainer. But the probability of that coming up to your plate to bat is a lot slimmer, because most people that have high equity will just go traditionally. But there are motivated sellers out there that will sell a property to you with high equity. I've experienced that. One example is in Grand Prairie, Texas. In the last crash, there was two couples. One of them got married, and they tried to sell their home. They were asking way too much, and the market had changed, and they still had pretty high equity in the property, but they were just done with it. And they allowed me just to step into their shoes and buy the property, even though it had significant equity in the property, and to start making the monthly payments, because they were just done with it, and they wanted to just move on with their life. So, and they had rented the property out, and they had bad renters in there, so it really gave them a bad taste. So I had to evict the renters, and then just put my own renters in there. So this is a perfect example when someone have high equity, but they'll just be done with it. They just want to get out of there because they had bad experiences in it. Now, let's talk about, is there a risk with subject to real estate investing? Yes, dude. Let me ask you this: have you ever ate your food and choked on your own food? I close my case. So in everything in life, there's risk. Let's run through some of the risks that I see, but I'm not an attorney. Number one is that the due on sell clause. Okay, in the loan structure of the paperwork, the bank says that if the buyer transfers the deed to someone else, the bank has the right to accelerate the loan, and the DOS, due on sell clause, exists, and I've done videos about that, so I'm not going to get into that into this. Another risk factor is that I might buy a property and I might become insolvent. Okay, myself, I might not be able to make the payments on it anymore. Okay, some reasons why I might not be able to do that: if I had a job, I get fired. Okay, or if I had businesses and they go under. Okay, so those are some examples. Other examples is the exit strategy may be wrong. For example, you might buy the property, or an investor might buy the property subject to, and they bought it to fix and flip it, and the market has changed. Okay, so now they're not going to be able to exit, and so they got to suck it up and make the monthly payment. So those are the risks. So there's always risk with everything. There's also risks of emotional risk. Like, for example, you're married and you get divorced and you have a nervous breakdown, okay? Or something happens to your legs and you get an emotional breakdown because you're missing your legs. Or you may be driving in your car or motorcycle or bicycle and wham, car hits you and die. And see, so there's always risk. So I like to put that out there. Now, is there rewards by buying property subject to? The answer is yes. Okay. In my opinion, the upside outweighs the downside, 1,000 to 1. Okay, there's so many benefits to buying property subject to existing mortgage versus traditionally. Okay, so let me run through some of those things. Number one, I don't have to use a lump sum of my money. So if I have a lump sum of money or if I don't have a lump sum of money, it doesn't matter, because in a subject to transaction, there's already an existing underlying mortgage, and all I'm doing is stepping through the seller's shoes, and the seller's deeding me the property. So I don't need a lump sum of money. Okay. Number two, getting deals without using my own credit or my company's credit, which is very, very important. Some people like to borrow a lot of money and put it under their company or under their own social. This strategy will not have my credit or my company's credit involved in any debt. Okay, so from the bank, in any bank. Okay, which is pretty amazing. Okay, now the other cool thing with subject to is that it doesn't matter. You don't have to beg a bank. Can I borrow another money for another deal I'm doing, please, Mr. Bank? Can I get money for another fix and flip, or can I borrow money for another rental? You don't have to do that, because buying houses with their existing mortgages does not require getting approved from a bank. Okay. Now again, we talked about there's risk associated, and this is the rewards associated with it. Okay. Another reward is that, buying property subject to, depend on your exit strategy. There's many different exit strategies, but I'm just going to name a few. You get positive cash flow, or you can get negative cash flow if you do it wrong. Okay. But in this case, we're talking about positive. Okay. You get lump sums of money on sales date. Whenever you sell the property, you'll get lump sum of money. Okay, you get appreciation, you get depreciation. Okay, you get to live in the property if that's what you want to do. If you want to buy one as a vacation home, So there's a lot of different benefits with it. You don't get to use your social. You don't have to use your credit. You don't have to use a lump sum of money. We talked about all that. Okay, and you don't have to beg for a bank. So those are just a few that I'm just freestyling to you guys. Okay. The rewards of buying property subject to. We talked about there's always risk with buying subject to, and today I talked about 6 ways where subject to may be appropriate for a creative real estate investor that knows and understands risk taking and opportunity, and being able to seize it through not only lump sum of money or not only credit, but also through mental creativity. Okay, so I hope that helped you out. If it did, click the like button. There is a free phone script for motivated sellers that I have. It teaches you how to identify motivated sellers. It's totally for free at the link below, or myrealestatedojo.com. And always remember, you are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, smarter than you think, and twice as beautiful as you ever imagined. Romy, peace.